Yes, today I'm going to talk about driving platform adoption. And before I do that, I would like to know more or less if any of you have a platform in your organization. Okay, good. Nice. Great. Sometimes people have more than one platform. So that it's going to level up the things because indeed, like in the recent surveys, around 80% of organizations report to have a platform. This room seems to be under the statistics, which means that probably you have a better life because you don't have to deal with all these platforms. This talk is work that we did together with Lina Muniram. She works at Chainalysis, which is a blockchain analytics company. It's more based on the financial aspect of things. And it's more of a case study of an exercise that we did in this company on how to rearrange the teams. But before we get into that, I'm going to start with a story time because we want story. And it starts in 2020, a year that we all remember as a very iconic year in the human history. And specifically in March, which I think is like a great month. And maybe you have something that changed the world in mind. But what I want to highlight is actually that Backstage got open source in March 2020 out of all the timeline in history. And Spotify released this software at this month. And I don't know if that was a cause of something else. But at that time, everybody was so hyped up because Backstage promised to solve all these things that engineering organizations always wish they had, like a single catalog where you can have all your software across all kind of stacks in one single place, self-service options, all this golden path. Everything was so perfect, and apparently Spotify had achieved this and they were open sourcing it. At that time, I was working in a consultancy company, so we lost no time and we started offering a consultancy service to package Backstage and make this work for you. And people were willing to pay six-figure contracts just to set up Backstage back then, because also money was cheaper in 2020 for technology. So I thought I wanted to make this easier because it was indeed a lot of work to set up Backstage back then. So I joined the startup that specialized on serving Backstage as a service. But rapidly, I learned that the problem of Backstage was not setting it up, which is already a problem, but the biggest challenge is driving adoption of the platform. And this is something that is common for all kind of platforms, whether they have a Backstage portal or not. Driving adoption is something that a lot of organizations struggle with. If you ever go to a platform engineering conference, you will see that there will be at least one or two talks on adoption and how do we drive adoption, because we need to get people to be on board of this. And a lot of the time, it's not only about the adoption, but it's also about alignment, because not all teams want the same things, and a lot of product teams who are expected to use the platform already are like full, their hands are full, and they don't want to use another tool. Developers already struggle with way too many tools. So how do we change this? On the other hand, we have SREs, which are a much more established practice. This term has existed for about 20 years. While platform engineering is a term that only starts to have a meaning and is still quite vague in most circles. And another important element of SREs is that it was very unlikely that some stakeholder is going to say, oh, actually, let's get rid of the SRE team, because nobody wants to be the one who calls removing the reliability team. While platforms see their funding shaking as the economy goes down, because they have to prove that this is effectively being good for the company. However, the SRE teams are usually smaller and they have access to less resources because they're exceedingly efficient. I remember a talk that I saw from Elastic, and they had a team of, I think, 80 something SREs for the entire world, and they managed over 100,000 SLOs. I was like, how do you do this? And it's very impressive. But that also means that there is less resources to have proactive initiatives. And there's a lot of the times SREs are stuck in firefighting mode. Like we have to just fix this and fix this and fix this. And a lot of them you're like, oh, we saw this coming, but now it's here. And we couldn't have done something to prevent it because we didn't have the resources. So before I go any further, I should introduce myself. I am indeed Jorge Lainfiesta, reliability advocate at Rootly. Rootly is an on-call incident management platform. I also got into road cycling last year, which made me lose a few friends because now I'm very annoying, but I'm fast. Well, not that much, but I'm also a fiction writer, and that do not mean my marketing copy. I write short stories and tales, and I got an award for a short story I wrote in the Barcelona city contest. And my co-speaker is Lina Muniram, who is not here today, but she has to attend some family issues. But I wanted to keep the slide to honor her and also to talk about Chainalysis as this blockchain company who run this experiment in real life on playing around with these roles. And to start, Chainalysis doesn't have a dedicated SRE team. Instead, what they have is a very robust platform team, and one of the platform engineers has the SRE hat, and he makes sure to build observability and certain features of reliability baked into the platform. But that only works when you have a new service for the golden path. But the biggest problem is the bigger services, that those are the scary services. Maybe it's a software that was written 10 years ago, and it's the one that actually holds the majority of the revenue on the company because it manages the complex things. And the person who knew how to use this cluster left the company years ago. Nobody wants to touch it. So we cannot really be like, hey, you should adopt the golden path because it's really cool. Like the team is scared of touching this. Self-service is not an option. So how do we onboard the meaty, the juicy services into the platform? And that's actually what's going to prove the worth of the platform. As long as the important services are not onboarded on the platform is a bit shaky. Why do the teams working in this big services hesitate of jumping into the platform wagon? A lot of them, the perceived risk can be high. The perceived investment can seem outrageous as well because we have this big thing, and if we want to change how this cluster is instrumented, maybe we have to touch much more than what we want to do. And there's also this huge tech debt that we have gathered over the years we had never heard. And to onboard onto the platform would mean to pay back this tech debt that nobody really wants to do this, or there's this fear of let's just keep running things and that's enough. But we at the platform team sees this as an opportunity. And this is something that was an experiment of saying, why don't we use SRE features as a hook to get people into the platform by giving them active assistance? Instead of saying, hey, this is a service, good luck, we're going to send somebody in, specifically the SRE engineer, to install some new instrumentation on the cluster, to do a specific one task on the cluster to get that on board, to get that service on board with the platform. And the first iteration of this process was just doing it easy. We were just like, okay, these services are very easy to migrate. They are not far from the golden path, so let's start there. We did that, and it was fantastic, right? Because we felt so successful. We onboarded these older services to the platform, boom. But the problem were really the bigger services or the medium services. And how do we start unraveling this issue? And we thought first we can start by teaching by example. So we were like, yes, that's a great idea. We should do this because everybody wants to be a platform engineer. So we want to teach them how we do things. So we had these guidelines that we created, guides, videos, recordings. We have these mob sessions in which we would show the developers how to do this little work. The problem is that we didn't get a lot back. There was low attendance to these mob sessions, very limited engagement with the project of the migration that we wanted to drive. And there was a lot of frustration, both for the platform team and for the product team, because they were like, you're just annoying us. We have a lot to do. This is not going to fly. So the next iteration was the old age adage of get someone a fish and you feed them for a day, teach them how to fish, and you feed them for a lifetime. And that's what we tried. And what we did was inverting the role of us teaching them, and instead they would be the ones driving the mob sessions. And there was another sneaky trick, which is now there's going to be a senior leader in the mob session call as well, because we convinced leadership that this was a good idea. And then the engagements changed radically, because people, just by having the presence of a senior manager in the call, made people feel more interested on showing up and being like, oh, hey, look at me, I'm the one solving this issue, because that's something that the product engineers valued. And then that helped us drive migrations of more services, definitely more than before. The other, yes, I already talked about this. The other thing that was essential was having a single point of ownership for these migration efforts into the platform, which gave us like the exceptional performance, because there was somebody who could be called out and say, hey, how's that going? And then they took it upon themselves to really take the project to the end. And as I said, the senior sponsorship from leadership was a key difference as well. So we have not done yet. There's many services that have yet to be migrated into the platform path. But the problem is that this is just the beginning. We're still learning. And the case that I presented was with one very UC service. But as soon as we were done with that, we're like, yes, we cracked the code. Let's do the same thing on this other big service. But it just didn't work because this other team had a different culture. Even though it's within the company, this team, for example, did not care about senior leadership at all. They would fight back. They would say no. They would say, we do not want this at all. This doesn't work for us. So there was no interest at all. So there was a much more hostile reception of any initiative that they could take. So we realized that this approach didn't scale as we had thought naively. And then the conclusion that is obvious in hindsight is that this is not a technical challenge. We're really dealing with a human challenge on how to drive adoption. However, what we thought is that even though there's not a silver bullet for this, we would like to approach this as engineers and have a structured way of engaging with teams based on different criteria, so we can have different assets on things that we can try. And this is pretty much the end of my talk, but it is kind of a codification of the parameters that we have tried with several teams on how we approach teams now. Before, we were just like, hey, we're the platform team. You should join our beautiful path. But now we are more careful of assessing the situation and figuring out if they already have something in place, or if they don't have any DevOps or any kind of experience at all, then we have to do something else. And then we have all these parameters that we try to codify. And this is like a much more structured way in which we can have more success onboarding teams instead of trial and error, because that can become frustrating and already damaged from the start, the relationships that we're going to start forming with this team. And yes, that's pretty much it. So thank you so much for listening to me.